Man, Michael Chandler signing with the UFC was even better than we originally thought. I'm super happy the guy signed with the organization. The guy has delivered on every facet. His fights, his interviews, his callouts, everything he does is exciting. And in hindsight, this may be one of the best signings in UFC history, as he turned out to be a must-see fighter. Every time he competes, you have to watch this guy fight. As he says, and I pretty much agree with him, he's probably the most electrifying fighter in the world. And that may be across all combat sports. One of the most entertaining fighters I've ever seen. The guy absolutely never disappoints. He's always in wars, back and forth fights, crazy knockouts. He's gonna get hurt. He's gonna hurt the opponent. There's always a level of danger and anticipation, like this crazy suspense when you're watching a Michael Chandler fight because you know something crazy is about to happen. And he's doing it against the best fighters in the world. Who would have thought? Michael Chandler, late in his life, going up against the absolute best fighters in the world and putting them through danger the way he is. And for a guy that I've been watching ever since his early days in Bellator, I saw the Eddie Wars. I saw his early Patricky Pitbull fight. I even saw his losses to Will Brooks. I never would have thought that toward the tail end of his career, he would be this guy. The way he used to fight, it was hard to see Michael Chandler have a long career in the sport. He was always exciting to watch, but to be part of those exciting fights with the top fighters in the world was something that seemed far-fetched. Even back in the day when RDA was the champ, when Anthony Pettis was the champ, when Benson Henderson was in his prime, it looked like even Michael Chandler didn't have enough to fight with those guys. And this is something I did not envision. I did not see Michael Chandler coming here and be able to do what he did in such a short amount of time. I mean, how can someone? When you were watching his career before he went in the UFC, he looked good, but it wasn't necessarily something that was blowing you away. So Michael Chandler's final Bellator fights found him like honing his right-handed skills. For an example, knocking out an older Benson Henderson who probably shouldn't be fighting today, and also knocking out Sidney Outlaw with a precise right straight down the center. Really showing his knockout ability to another level, and especially that Patricky Pitbull fight where he just sent him to the gulag. But then there weren't so many spectacular fights. For an example, he fought Brent Primus, and he won the fight for sure. But it was not easy for him. It went 5 rounds. He wasn't able to knock him out. He had a pretty difficult time with Brent Primus, and also, of course, getting knocked out by a featherweight Patricio Pitbull with 1 punch in the first round. Wasn't even like a minute into the fight. So Chandler was pretty much knocking out older guys, knocking out guys that didn't have much experience and weren't on his level. And when guys were somewhat on his level, he had a pretty difficult time with them in a 5-round fight. And also seeing him getting knocked out flat like that against Pitbull. The thought of him not being super successful against the top guys in the UFC was kind of understandable. It was very logical. Perhaps he can get some big knockouts here and here because of the different level of power that he always had. He's the most powerful lightweight we've ever seen before, and he always has been. But we didn't know how efficient he would be with the limited skills that he has. In terms of grappling, he is top-notch. He just has a difficult time in the guard. But most of his fights have been contested on the feet, even in Bellator. And still today, he still has that limited skill set. He doesn't have a lot of variety to what he does. He has a right straight, he has a decent jab, a good right low kick. That's pretty much it. He will throw a left hook here and there, he'll throw a body shot here and there, and apparently a front kick to the face for the first time in his career. Imagine that. You threw your first front kick to the face ever, where everybody else is throwing those attacks. Everyone's been throwing that for years, but it's nothing like you see from, Charles Oliveira putting you into a line of fire with his front kicks, with his knees, with his elbows, with his flying attacks, with his different kind of punches and spinning kicks and spinning back fists and stuff. Or you look at Tony Ferguson, I mean, the guy is completely versatile. Even if you look at someone like Conor McGregor, much more versatile on the feet than Michael Chandler is. Or Dustin Poirier, or even someone like Justin Gaethje, who he himself is not the most versatile, still a little bit more than Michael Chandler is. It seems to be like a similar effect to what Tyron Woodley had to his stand-up. He was very powerful, extremely fast, can cross distances quickly, but didn't have a lot more than a right hand and a right low kick. That's very similar to what Michael Chandler does, except Michael Chandler is a lot more aggressive. That's the biggest difference here. He's a lot more aggressive, and he's willing to throw his punches. He's willing to advance. He's willing to go to wars. He's not afraid to get hit. He's not afraid to get knocked down. He knows that's going to happen to himself, and he accepts it. He accepts the kind of wars he's going to be in. Whereas Tyron Woodley was never in that mental state. He never had that mental fortitude that Michael Chandler has, and that's the biggest difference there. Honestly, if Michael Chandler was passive in fights, if he would put his back to the cage the way Woodley did, he'd pretty much be the same kind of fighter, except he would get tagged more often. I think Woodley basically had better defense, but in the stand-up, Chandler would be a very similar fighter to how Tyron Woodley was. But mentally, that's not him at all. He's like an ironclad gladiator, and the guy has found the success that he has. That's crazy to think about. It's about the efficiency, the precision, the timing, the power, the speed able to get into the opponent, all that together, backed by this warrior mentality. That's what makes Michael Chandler so dangerous on the feet. But honestly, this might be UFC bias. UFC bias is a real thing where people believe that the UFC level is higher than everyone else. For the most part, it actually is. Generally speaking, it is. But there is a bit of an exaggeration to it because there have been a few Bellator fighters who have come into the UFC and had success. Eddie Alvarez became a champion, Alexander Volkov became a top 5 fighter in the world, and now with Michael Chandler being another top 5 fighter. And before any of these guys came into the UFC, it was always the same narrative every single time. The fans always said that these guys did not have enough to compete with the UFC caliber, and many times they showed otherwise. And certainly with Michael Chandler coming to the UFC, not a lot of people thought he would have that level of success. Not a lot of people thought that he would knock out Dan Hooker, the first guy to knock Hooker out with headshots in the UFC. And he did it in the very first round after Hooker came off that war with Dustin Poirier. So a lot of people actually thought that Hooker was among the best lightweights in the world. Michael Chandler blasted him into another dimension. Then he goes into an immediate title fight with the best lightweight on the planet, Charles Oliveira, and gives the guy a war. Hurt him a couple times in the fight, dropped him, hit him with a bunch of ground and pound, even had a 10-8 round against him. And of course, everything turned on its head afterward, but it showed the competitiveness that Michael Chandler had with the absolute best guy in the world. Then he goes into another war with Justin Gaethje. Back and forth fight up until the 3rd round, and even hurt Gaethje multiple times. And then going on to knock out a good-looking Tony Ferguson. So he has proven a lot of people wrong about his skills. But the guy's also shown to have many different qualities to become some kind of star. He has the look, he has a personality, he talks very well, he might be the most entertaining fighter in the world. He's a knockout machine. He fights in a way that a lot of people love, and he quickly garnered many fans because of it. Look how fast Michael Chandler made a name for himself. A lot of people didn't know about him when he was in Bellator. Only like the real hardcore fans knew about Michael Chandler. In like 2 to 3 fights, this guy's already one of the biggest lightweights in the world. Imagine if that was a younger Michael Chandler. If that was Michael Chandler when he was like 29 years old. Let's say like 6 to 7 years ago. If Chandler was able to compete with the RDAs, with the Conor McGregors, with the Eddie Alvarez's in the UFC, he may have been one of the biggest stars in the sport. But now he has a limited amount of time to make things work for him. He's already calling out Conor McGregor. He's calling out the right people at the right time. With his finishes, he's going to get the attention of some of the bigger stars in the sport to want to fight him because they want to be a part of that. Imagine that. The biggest stars in the world want to be a part of a Michael Chandler fight, a part of a Michael Chandler build-up, because everybody knows when Chandler is on the card, it's going to be explosive. It's going to be fun. It's going to be something a lot of people are going to be talking about. When Chandler fights, people watch and people talk. And moving forward, who is going to fight Conor McGregor? If he fights smart, he will destroy Conor McGregor. He would absolutely annihilate him. As long as he doesn't get countered coming in, that's the biggest thing against Chandler. Conor is a dangerous counterpuncher. Still in today's standards, he's one of the best counterpunchers in the entire UFC. And Chandler could be pretty defenseless sometimes, and his acceptance to get hurt could find himself getting knocked out. He rushes in with the right hand and Conor is able to slip by it. He might eat an Irish left hand to the jaw. But if he comes out there with leg kicks, he comes out there with many feints, and ultimately executing the takedowns at perfect timings, that's an easy one for Chandler, man. He goes up against Dustin Poirier. That in itself is going to be a war. Dustin could find himself eating a right hand being southpaw versus orthodox, and the fact that Chandler potentially has a better right straight than Dustin has a left straight, and Chandler's going to be the aggressor in the fight. He's going to chase that outside foot, looking for his right hands. He also has the leg kicks. He also has the takedown. That's actually not an easy fight for Dustin Poirier. He goes up against Charles Oliveira again. It's going to be another war. He goes up against Justin Gaethje. It's going to be another war. He goes up against even Islam Makhachev. Makhachev is seen as like the boogeyman of the division right now. But Chandler may have the absolute best style against him. A guy who's hard to take to the ground. When it comes to grappling, he can grapple for 5 rounds. And he could put Islam's lights out at any given moment. Southpaw versus orthodox again opens up the weapons that Chandler puts everybody out with. Even if he goes up against Beneil Dariush, that might be a given fight for Chandler. Chandler seems to be not an easy fight for anybody in this division. Where before, when I was talking about him when he came into the UFC, I had the complete opposite perspective. I thought Chandler would not be able to hang with a lot of these guys. But it turns out a lot of these guys have a hard time hanging with him.